working yourself to death just to go up the corporate ladder to make more money is something a lot of us get trapped in, right? We see a lot of people who start to get into, these high paying jobs or jobs that have growth opportunities get stuck in the sort of constant want for more in that specific job. And I want to sort of break down why I think it's important for you to invest more in yourself, just as much as certain people invest in their job. I think it's important to invest that same energy or more energy into yourself. So the reason behind this is because you don't want to get to a point one day, right, where you're working in this job, this whatever corporation or organization, company, and you get to a point where you're just fed up. Maybe you're sick of the job, or maybe it wasn't what you thought, like the demands for the position you're doing are not matching your pay or whatever it is, like. Or maybe you just want more. You just want something different. You want to whatever, if it's working for yourself or if it's just being able to pivot into something more aligned with your skill set and how you want your lifestyle to inevitably unfold. I think it's important to realize that it's a necessary thing for you to develop in your spare time. So a lot of people, I think, who overinvest in their jobs, right, may get to a point one day where, like, you invest so much time into meeting new people, making connections, learning different processes, and also commuting, going back and forth, and then also like staying extra hours, like staying after you're supposed to leave, just so you maybe want to prove to your superiors that you're about what you do, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with like being an overachiever, being someone who is wanting more out of life. We all naturally want that, but the problem is, like, after a certain point, like the chasing, right, you might like, I think Joseph Campbell has a saying, like, people who climb the corporate ladder, like, they realize, like, once they get to the top of the ladder, like, they realize they were climbing the wrong ladder. And that's really like what I'm trying to convey here, is that, like, you can go as high as you want in a corporation, but is the level of stress worth it? Is the even the money, right? Like, money is obviously something that I think a lot of us are motivated by. I'm certainly motivated by money, but at what point do you make so much, right, to deal with so much, to sort of maybe like, for example, like people that work in like executive positions or leadership roles that are in charge of that just have a lot of responsibility, right? How many stories do you hear of people claiming that they get phone calls after work hours, right? And or getting calls while they're sleeping, getting woken up, the list goes on. And or just having unnecessary responsibilities, right, that just pile up and sort of break you down mentally. And then also having that spill into your personal life, having that spill into your health. And obviously, guys, stress is a killer, right? Stress literally kills brain cells, right? So, do you want to spend, and I'm not saying, stress is inevitable, right? We all experience stress no matter what, like with a job or not, right? Because life is, there's so many different things that come our way. But do you want to spend, most of your time stressed out because of a job? Or would you rather, still work whatever you're doing right now, but when you come home, invest a good sum of your energy and time into research, into building something that you want to maybe one day be able to transition into, right? I think that's kind of like the ideal position we'd all like to be in, right? Maybe whatever you're doing right now on the side, it might not be making a lot of money, right? But let's say you commit 5 years to building it, right, to get it to a point where it can produce something. Maybe at some point you get to this point in life where you're so fed up with your job, or you're so over it, and you just want something new. Maybe you might not be able to fully transition into your side project or your side hustle, but maybe you can transition into something else, right? Because you're making some income from whatever you've built or whatever you're building on a day-on basis. So this is just a sort of like a practical video for some of you guys, because here's the thing, You don't want to spend 10, 15 years, especially in your 20s, you know, working. We all work for someone else, but you don't want to spend all that time and energy investing in that one thing when obviously there's a pay, you know, like there's a ceiling to how much you can earn, right? Like, you know, some jobs, right, you can earn 200,000, 300,000, right? But let's be realistic, right? If you invest, you know, 10 years into a job, right, you might be able to make $100,000 or more, right? Depending on obviously the position or whatnot, right? But what if you know, that job you don't like that job, right? Or you don't, remember, like I said earlier, you just don't have the same level of care that you did when you started, right? And you find out, you know, that your motivation was just really sort of money oriented, right? It wasn't necessarily like, hey, I want to actually, you know, like spend my time here because I like what I do. It's just money motivated, right? And that's a problem too, because again, if money is just your motivation, right, the stress will pile up, being overworked will pile up, the excess responsibilities will pile up, right? And yeah, you know, your bank account might start to overflow, right? But if you're not happy, if you're not satisfied, and you know, you just want something different out of life, and you want to offer something else to, you know, as a service or as a skill to, you know, make money. If you didn't invest the time, right, while you were working that job, you won't be able to make that transition if you know, get to a breaking point one day where you've had enough. So I just want you guys, like I said, you know, and this kind of sort of piggybacks off my last video where I discussed, you know, leverage in the job market and why it's important. Like, you know, it's not really, you know, because everyone says, you know, it's about protecting yourself from getting fired. Yes, obviously that is a concern. But I think it's more important to realize that, like, you as a human being, your value that you want to bring to society to the greatest degree possible that God has planned for you in this lifetime is important for you to actualize, right? So that's different for all of you, but that actualization process can only come about if you spend the little time that you do have outside of your job investing over a long period of time, right? So I want you guys to inevitably have the option, you know, to pivot or, right, to maybe take a step back and do something a little laid back and then, you know, as a result of you stepping back, right, let's say you take a job that pays less, but, you know, it doesn't demand so much time or responsibility and headache, right? Now you can, all that energy that you were investing, right, you know, worrying about certain things, or, you know, just the workload in general and the time, you can devote all of that energy, or most of that energy now, to building your side hustle or building your business or whatever thing that you've been working on for the longest time. So yeah, and you know, again, this isn't for everybody, right? Like, some people just are content with going to work and that's it, and they go home, right? Some people are content making $50,000 a year. Some people are content making, you know, $100,000 a year as a lifestyle forever, right? But, you know, like, not everyone's supposed to make $1 million, but I think, you know, for the most part, you guys want to be well off, right? You guys want to have at least, you know, a consistent income that can, you know, fund a lifestyle that you want to live, right? So, you know, if that means making $200,000 or $300,000 a year, right, then so be it. Doesn't mean you have to be a millionaire, doesn't mean you have to be a multimillionaire, but you can certainly get to a point where you're making something, you know, you're making money from something that you enjoy doing that doesn't, again, require all the stress, all the frustration, all the anxiety, and the sense of being overworked, the sense of just having too much on your plate, right? Just for what? A paycheck, right? So again, and you know, this goes against a lot of what I sort of preach here on this YouTube channel, right? Because I talk a lot about just, you know, putting your head down and doing it no matter what, and, you know, sort of blocking out all the things that frustrate you, or you know, just you don't enjoy, like, you know, just blocking it out. But guys, at the end of the day, right, you can only handle so much for so long before you get to a point where it's like, hey, it's got to be time for more. It's got to be time for something different, right? Because you don't want to spend your whole life, right, being miserable, right? And oftentimes and not, right? You know, there's this saying that happiness is a choice, right? I would argue to some degree it is, right? But I would argue that a lot of our happiness, and you know, this isn't true all the time, but I think it's true most of the time, a lot of your happiness comes from your outside reality, from the things you have to deal with on a consistent basis, right? Like, I would argue if you're someone who is stressed out all the time, right? Who has to, you know, keep up with bills and go to a job that sucks, that's not rewarding, that's boring as shit, right? You know, that like maybe you just have to be there 8 hours a day. Like, you know, like for me sometimes, like I'll be honest, like I get my work done in 2 to 3 hours and I can go home, right? But because I have to pay bills, right? And because, you know, all of us have to pay bills, right? I have to stay the full 8 hours, right? Now, obviously I'm not salary, so that makes sense. But the idea is that you don't want to be bound to that lifestyle forever where you have to do something because you have to pay bills, because you have to, or whatever, pay for your kids, or, you know, the list goes on. So, and as far as like, you know, happiness goes, you know, a lot of happiness comes from our outside world, right? Whether we want to realize it or not. You know, you can only fake happiness for so long. Like, you know, and you can only push off things that are you can only push off things that are inside your reality for a short period of time before they start to overcome you and become overbearing, right? Like, you know, like for example, you can hate your boss and you can hate your job and you can, you know, hate whatever goes on, right? But eventually, right? And you can sort of like, you know, tell yourself, you know, all right, it is what it is. I'm gonna let them do that, you know, do them, and I can do, you know, just focus on what I can control and everything that comes along with that mindset, right? But eventually, right, you're gonna, like, there's gonna be a point where it's like a relationship that you don't like, right? Like if you're in a relationship and the girl or guy you're dating, you know, is not matching what you want, right? Or they're being a headache, they're being a pain in the ass, right? That can be a huge source of stress, right? And again, you can only deal with that or hold that in for so long before you end the relationship or before something happens, you snap, or, you know, whatever, physical, verbal abuse, whatever happens, right? So that's sort of like the same message I'm really trying to, you know, bring forward here, is that like, don't be in a position in life where you have to tolerate something because you didn't dedicate the time and the energy to building something valuable that you find meaningful enough to give to other people, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Like, we all want to have some form of contribution, right? Because that's how we're genetically programmed. We're all programmed to give value, right? Give other human beings a good or service. So if you're not giving the service that you want, or the service that you're giving to other people is sort of forced upon you because you have to pay bills, because, you know, the money's good or whatever, you know, all these sort of things we tell ourselves to convince ourselves to stay where we're at, then you're just destined for a life of not having choice, not having freedom, and having to deal with the things that you don't like to deal with ongoing for, you know, as long as you are in your working career. And I don't think that's what you want. So, you know, next time you're, you know, in a sort of position where you're just, you know, like over investing in your job, and you know, you're going home and you're just spending excess time, you know, not doing the things that are funding your business or your side hustle or the project that you're building up, just remember, you know, in 40 years, 30, 40 years, right? Do you want to be in the same position you're at now, where you're dealing with the same things and you keep telling yourself it's okay? You keep telling yourself, you know, there's certain things you just can't control. You keep telling yourself that everything is fine, right? When it's not, right? So I don't want you guys to live a life where you're not being honest with yourself, and you're living, you know, you're not living the genuine expression that God has placed inside of you, right? You can live a fake life purpose, right? You can live this sort of corporate life where, you know, you fake your personality to be professional, right? And, you know, that can be your existence, right? And, you know, earn a good living. Maybe you make over $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, right? But if it eats your soul alive, right, and it stresses you out and it keeps you tired, who cares? Who cares if you make $150,000 a year, right? You're still not free. You still aren't, you know, investing the time and energy and effort into something that you find meaningful and you find can bring value to human beings genuinely, not just in a job, right? So yeah, that's it, guys. That's all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you are new to my channel, make sure to subscribe. If you guys have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them down below. And as always, I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.